Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to talk about new sustainability standards in cleantech and cannabis. I'm Lolla Stovall, Counsel at Zuber Lawler. I handle corporate transactions and M&A, and I lead the cleantech practice. And if you notice my accent, this is a clever hack by our marketing department to make sure everyone pays attention and no one can fall asleep. Many of you are familiar with Zuber Lawler due to its well-established cannabis practice. About 15 years ago, the firm took pride in learning everything there was to know about cannabis and in sharing that knowledge before marijuana law became mainstream. What you may not know is that the firm is also nurturing and growing many other innovative niche practices. After cannabis, there was cryptocurrency, the e-gaming, non-fungible tokens, psychedelics, and many more innovative niches, including now cleantech. In addition to cultivating legal expertise, we pride ourselves on being the connectors in this industry and bringing together clients and contacts across various industries. So joining us today are Ed Ranger of the Ranger firm, James Eaves from VoltServer, Wes Reynolds with Green Mill Supercritical, Ryan Hurley with Copperstate Farms, Ivy Bader with Global Go, and of course, our esteemed moderator, Jackim. Janet.
Thank you, Lola.
Thank you so much for allowing me to introduce you today. Janet is my personal role model, and if I was allowed to recount all of Janet's accomplishments, we would easily go outside of the event hour. So I'll keep this brief, but I encourage you to check out the firm's website and also Janet's bio. So Ms. Jackim is located in Phoenix. She's actively engaged in shaping the future of the Arizona cannabis industry. Janet serves on the board of directors of Arizona Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and some of her past and present credits include being secretary of the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association and also serving on the legal committee of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. At Zuber Lawler, Janet is head of the cannabis practice and also one of the firm's very select few equity partners. Janet's practice embraces many sophisticated areas, including M&A work, business restructuring, dispensary certificate applications, partner dispute resolution, and other complex legal work within the cannabis space and beyond. Janet's clients are some of the very well-known names in this industry, and they include multi-state operators, producers, cultivators, investors, and banks. So thank you, Janet, for taking the time to moderate this panel today, and the mic is now all yours.
Thank you, Lola. I'm embarrassed and humbled, but thank you for that kind introduction. This webinar addresses the intersection of clean tech and cannabis, the new sustainability standard. It's particularly interesting that we would hold this webinar following the recent release of the dark comedy Don't Look Up, Netflix's metaphorical hit film showcasing an Earth extinction level event. For those of you who have not yet watched this film, we are presented with a Mount Everest size comet hurtling toward Earth within 6 months, certain to destroy our beloved planet. But alas, no one listens to the 2 scientists who have discovered the comet and its direct path to Earth. Or at least no one takes sufficient measures to throw the comet off its path of destruction. And at the end, we endure very painful family discussions around the dining room table, their last dinner, until everything is gone, except for the president's son, played by Jonah Hill, who emerges from the rubble as the last man alive. He records a social media video, signing off with, "Don't forget to like and subscribe." "Don't look up" is a metaphor relating to the destruction caused by climate change. Sadly, without the efforts of our panelists today and others intimately involved in saving our planet from climate change, we really may lose ourselves, our planet. So let's talk about how these panelists and their companies are making a difference in climate change, which has been described as the defining problem of our century. Let me first introduce everyone. Ed Ranger has over 30 years of corporate legal and strategic environmental, energy and trade experience, representing multinational companies and governments in Arizona and foreign jurisdictions. He is one of the few US lawyers licensed to practice law in Mexico. His unique skill set permits him to continue pursuing cross-border energy, environmental, and natural resource initiatives here in the States and throughout other emerging markets. Ivy Bader hails from the cannabis cultivation world, where she studied cultivation from experts in that field. Ivy is today the licensing and compliance manager of our sponsor, Global Go. She is often engaged with clients attempting to navigate complex state regulations and requirements, which increasingly now include clean tech obligations. Ryan Hurley is uniquely qualified to be enshrined in the Cannabis Hall of Fame for being one of the first attorneys to champion marijuana businesses. From private practice, Ryan solidified his standing in the Arizona marketplace by joining Copperstate Farms as general counsel. Copperstate is the largest marijuana cannabis grower in the Southwest. An agricultural economist, PhD, and full professor at Laval University in Quebec, Canada, James Eaves focuses his clean tech contributions on emerging technologies that improve profitability and sustainability of indoor farming. I'm looking forward to learning about his company VoltServer and its new form of touch-safe, high-voltage electricity named digital electricity. Wes Reynolds is the president and CEO of Green Mill Supercritical, which produces tech-advanced cannabis extraction machines specializing in CO2 extraction that is increasingly effective, less expensive, and permits new product development. Today, he is focused on growing market share, but in the past, he was president of Sutera, Florida, for which he accomplished the launch of 6 new dispensaries and 2 distribution facilities. He also held senior level positions with Coca-Cola International. Now, with the somewhat depressing backdrop of Don't Look Up, let's discuss how each of these speakers and their respective businesses are contributing to clean tech and the continuing of life on our beautiful Earth. Let's start at or in the ground, so to speak, with the growers on our panel and their clean tech contributions. Ryan and James, I'd like to direct my questions first to you. And please take your time and give us your Cleantech contributions. The first question is, what sustainability issues do you face, and what are your respective operations doing about those issues? Who's going first? Ryan?
Sure. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Janet. That was very nice.
I think I have to bow to you.
Made me blush a little bit. So yes, I've been in-house with Copperstate Farms for about 4.5 years now. We operate one of the largest cannabis greenhouses in the country. It's a 40-acre facility in rural northern Arizona in a town called Snowflake. It was originally a Dutch-style greenhouse for tomatoes and cucumbers, and we have retrofitted it for cannabis. So right off the bat, I am proud that our cannabis is sun-grown, and we do use a little bit of supplemental light in the winter, but compared to the folks that are growing indoors in Phoenix in the summer when it's 120 degrees, our cannabis is more sustainable right off the bat. So I'm proud of that from the get-go. Beyond that, it is a very large operation that we have. And so one of our biggest challenges is managing our waste stream properly and trying to minimize the impacts of that. So we're always looking at ways to try to recycle or find people to reuse some of our byproducts. That can be very challenging in the cannabis space. And one example is, we have a large ethanol extraction facility at the farm, and we would like to be able to recycle that ethanol, but it has trace amounts of THC in it. And so when you send it over to the recycler and they concentrate it down, there's a chance that they might be in possession of something that they're not allowed to be in possession of by state law. So there's lots of barriers we're trying to work through. We try to work in partnership with our Department of Environmental Quality. And we are certainly always looking for ways to make our operation cleaner, more sustainable.
James, can you explain to us your sustainability issues that your company is facing and how you're trying to accommodate?
Yeah, what we, our company has its own sustainability issues like all companies. What we do is we actually try to help producers with their sustainability issues. And so what VoltServer is our company invented something that we call digital electricity. And like you said, it's high voltage electricity that you can touch, which surprises people. Sometimes they have a hard time wrapping their mind around that. But what that means is that we've been classified by the National Electric Code as a limited power source. And that's the same thing as like an Ethernet cable that you use to charge your phone. And it means that you can distribute high voltage electricity to, say, LED lights or fans in a greenhouse using the same methods used for Ethernet cable. You don't need conduit. You don't need sub panels or breakers or all the traditional equipment you need. And most importantly, use 1/5 the labor. Why that's important for sustainability is that growers, their biggest impact on the environment is electricity use typically. And they're often looking, and that's also the biggest cost they face, right? The cost of installing power to lighting in these facilities or fans, if you're can account for about 50% of the cost of building facility. And then your operating costs are, your second highest operating cost is electricity also. Carbon, the steel that you use to actually distribute the electricity to this lighting is typically in carbon or aluminum conduit. And that's the second most, that's one of the most intensive, carbon intensive metals or products in the world is producing steel. And so we eliminate that from the facility. And so just in general, what we do is we help people. We're constantly focusing on how can we improve the efficiency of delivering light? How can we make it cheaper and more efficient for these facilities to actually couple or use solar renewable microgrids to provide lighting to these systems? And that's I'm sure we're going to get into that. That's a big challenge that intersects with regulation and technology. And that's going to be over the next few years, especially with recent changes we've seen in California law over the next few years. I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger topic about how we can more effectively integrate these high energy intensive facilities with renewable energy sources.
Well, if I may skip around a bit, Ivy, this appears to be your expertise, regulations, requirements, compliance. How are cannabis companies being impacted by the push for clean tech?
Yes, that's a great question. So what we're seeing is we are seeing jurisdictions starting to enact ways to move towards a more sustainable approach to operations. So for example, in California, there was a proposal to Title 24, which essentially regulated equipment, specifically lighting. So any cultivator that was using HPS lighting, high pressure sodium, which is very energy inefficient. Anyone who's already using it, grandfathered in, moving forward, starting 2023, those operators will need to move towards LEDs. Now, luckily, the technology is there now, so that's great. But as far as compliance is concerned, we're starting to see more regulations pop up. Additionally, in New York City to be exact, there was a local rule enacted that takes effect 2024, which regulates any building that has 25,000 square feet or more. And what it does is it monitors energy consumption and it imposes fines for overconsumption. So when you're thinking about indoor growing in one of the 5 boroughs in NYC, that is going to be very difficult to comply with. And that, like I said, takes effect 2024 and it ramps up all the way to 2030. So those are some of the things that we're starting to see as far as compliance is concerned.
I'll ask the panel with respect to this question. If the states are beginning to require cannabis clean tech, are the states also advancing, say, tax benefits or other benefits that can encourage the already overtaxed cannabis industry to move into clean tech? Anyone want to address that? Anyone aware of any?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a
Thank
brief
you.
shot at it, Janet. I think
Yeah.
to me, the primary barrier there is more legalization than taxation issues. And so I think we're all looking forward to seeing this product further legalized, not just in the US, but around the world. And as that happens, our expectation is that we'll see more regulation, not less. And so that more regulation as it comes, I think can be a really bad thing. It can be onerous, but it can also be a great opportunity to, I think, weed out a lot of sort of operations in the industry and be good for consumers because they will be able to see more what's in the product specifically than maybe they can see today. But I think that regulation will also give everybody a chance to open up the flows of capital in both directions, not just in one direction. And so you're right to assert that the requirements for clean tech equipment are challenging and should be rewarded with some incentives on the other side. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing across the board, not just with clean tech, but lots of places in the industry.
True. Ryan and James, do your marketing messages to consumers or investors, for example, include a clean tech commitment, or are your investors, financiers requiring clean tech?
I'll tackle that. Certainly, we haven't seen any demands on that from our investors. You know, I think there's definitely a growing movement, particularly in public companies, to have, you know, environmental social governance type initiatives. But we're still a private company, and we haven't really seen that demand from our investors. But certainly, it's something that resonates with our consumers, and something that we put out front in our branding and in our marketing. Sun-grown, our dispensaries, we brand them as Soul Flower, SOL flower. So it's something that we want to put in the consumer's mind, and I think they do respond to that.
Ryan, does your company, has it adopted a strategic plan on clean tech, like reaching certain goals by X date, for example?
No, not yet. As you can imagine, there's about 9 million things to do in this industry, and about time to do you know, less than half of them in any given day. And the industry is so chaotic, it feels like the sand is shifting under your feet sometimes. So it's a challenge for us just to keep up with everything on a day-to-day basis. Certainly, that is in my long-term goals, to try to look at it on a more holistic level and try to implement a plan going forward. But right now, we're just trying to sort of eat around the edges and try to do what we can within the context of our day-to-day business.
Great. I'd ask Ivy and any of our other panelists, are you adopting a strategic plan on clean tech, or is it possible where our panelists and our topic is just too early?
Can I actually
go ahead?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quick. It's because I think our company, our mission, and the people in our company would really like to see a bigger push, a bigger emphasis on clean tech. Surely our investors are, to answer that question, our investors are asking us, and there's more interest from the investment community about companies that have a clean tech focus. Maybe it's because we're a technology company. But one of the surprising things is that, you know, I think from our customers, right, from producers, I think it's challenging for them right now, especially the industry is growing so quickly, and they're learning so fast. It's really hard for them to put sustainability at the top of the list. So like when we're pitching, like when we started talking about our product, we initially started talking about we remove hundreds of tons of carbon by removing that conduit. We improve the efficiency of distributing electricity by 8% or 10%, but it just didn't resonate. Well, so now we focus on the cost. We reduce costs by 30%. And so I think until there's a sort of a more bottom up, maybe from the consumers of cannabis products, or companies are forced, as the market starts slowing down and companies are forced to focus on efficiency, you probably won't see that item of sustainability rise to the top of, you know, their attention, in these companies' attentions. I think they want to. It just, you know, like Ryan was saying, there's just so much for them to juggle at this point.
But wouldn't you say that typically clean tech technologies are expected to be cost savers? And wouldn't you expect that large cultivation facilities, companies with a number of dispensaries, for example, are looking for ways to cut their costs, their energy consumption, even if they're not interested in saving the world, if you will, they need to save the bottom line.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there are some like kind of low lying fruit that improve the bottom line and improve efficiency. But sometimes the payback period for these investments is really long. And I think that's what the challenge is. Like, how do you focus on something that won't return financially to me for 10 years when I can make investments, or I need to make investments today that will have paybacks in 6 months? That's, I think, the challenge, the financial calculus.
Yeah, I can certainly speak directly to that. You know, that where there are those opportunities where it's obvious that you can, you know, have cost savings and it results in sustainability without a large capital outlay. Those are easy to do and easy to get through our management and our board. But when it comes to something that requires a large capital, as you may know, I mean, raising capital in the cannabis industry is incredibly challenging. It's very expensive. You know, it's very complex due to the federal illegality. So, you know, when I go and I raise capital, you know, every dollar of that is going to growing more cannabis and not necessarily going to being more efficient at it, because right now the margins are high enough that it makes more sense to put that dollar into another plant versus, you know, a solar panel, for example.
Interesting. Let's switch it. Oh, Ivy, did you want to contribute?
Thank you. So I was just going to highlight, you know, kind of the logistical hurdles between already being operational and becoming operational. So I do think it's a little bit easier to propose ideas as you're drafting and planning. And for example, if you are lucky enough to be applying for a competitive or merit-based application, and essentially these applications are literally won and lost with less than a point, even a quarter of a point or less. And so it really does make a difference when you are writing these narratives, these applications for the local jurisdictions. They want to see clean tech. They want to see you implementing sustainable measures, even if it's for things like, for example, motion sensors on lights, right? So when there's no motion detected for about 15 minutes, they'll shut off automatically. If someone walks back into the room, they turn on. And that can also be easier on your pocketbook as well. So those are the things that local you know, regulators are going to be looking for cultivation, any proposal of some kind of closed loop water system that catches runoff water, filters it to reuse it, that kind of a thing. Those things are going to score points and literally can be the difference between getting a license or not getting a license. Additionally, I know particularly here in California, the state is cracking down on CEQA compliance, right? And so we also want to make sure, you know, as far as state licensing is concerned, that we are able to get all of our CDFW approvals and water board approvals and things like that. And what we are seeing is that there are more measures that are needed to be taken in order to get licensing at the state level as well.
Thank you. Anyone further comment on that?
No, I mean, I just want to make one quick comment because I think it goes across industries. It's certainly been relevant for me in my career, both, you know, when I was at Coke and Surterra and now at Green Mill. And, you know, I think this notion of, you know, clean tech is a great one. And I think the most important element of that is that you have to, I think, combine efficiency and effectiveness. And without both of them, you lose. And so what I think we're seeing in the industry right now is a lot of times we're seeing a lot of promise. We're seeing a lot of things that people are saying, oh, this will work or this could work. But then it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, if it's not effective, it's not helping anybody. It doesn't matter how clean it might be. And one of the reasons we love supercritical CO2 at Green Mill is because it not only is incredibly efficient, it is super effective at the same time. And so, you know, we've spent lots of time and lots of effort and lots of capital, you know, developing a system that better controls the variables associated with the extraction process, because it creates a better product for the consumer, not because it's a clean tech application, but because by taking that route, we end up with a better product. And that's just good for everybody. So, you know, we're increasing efficiency all the time and the effectiveness is getting increased all the time. But I think this notion of, you know, better, faster, cheaper is a good idea for the world. And it's a good idea for the cannabis industry. And I think that's an important question to keep at the front of the table here does it work? That's the most important thing.
Tell us about that CO2 extraction methodology and your machines.
Well,
and
yeah.
Like, I don't know anything about this, and probably most of us on this panel have had little experience actually producing, say, extracted products?
Well, I mean, Ryan has a lot of experience with it, obviously, and some other folks I know have experience with it. And I won't belabor it because it's a topic of its own that we don't need to, hijack this call with. But extraction in its basic form is just putting any botanical substance under pressure with some solvent, with heat and pressure applied to that solvent. And the solvent could be anything from, you technically could do it with water. You could do it with ethanol or hydrocarbons. Any solvent will do the job. But when you extract, what you're doing is you're through heat and pressure, you're targeting specific molecules of a botanical product, or all of them if you want to. But you can also just target specific molecules. Supercritical CO2 allows some has unique properties that allow it to be very precise in the molecules that it targets in that process. And that it has zero residual effect. It's a clean chemical that doesn't require any removal. It's very, very clean and very precise. It's been criticized in the past as being slower, more expensive on the front end, and probably a smaller choice for a smaller application. Those things are proving to not be as true, but I won't get into all those. But then up until the last couple of months, the industry, anybody that's doing supercritical CO2 extraction still has to do what's called a winterization process after they extract their product, which is a removal of fats and lipids from the oil that's created through the extraction process. That winterization is done with ethanol. It's an ethanol bath that the product is washed in, the product's frozen at that point, and then the fats and lipids are removed. So you've taken this perfectly beautiful, clean process and now adulterated it with this, dirty ethanol process. And so everybody goes, what's the point? Why don't we just do ethanol from the beginning? But at Green Mill Supercritical, we've now shipped our first real-time winterization system, removes all the need for winterization in the process, makes it truly in line with what the operator is doing anyway. So again, saving more efficiency. Cost savings are astronomical, and then you also end up with people savings. You're not having to hire people to do the winterization process. You've removed this dirty, clunky process. So we really see this chasing this complete level of efficiency, which results in more and more effectiveness, as sort of the holy grail of what we're trying to do at Green Mill. And we see it changing the industry from a CO2 extraction perspective. So we're proud of it, obviously, and I'm sorry to ramble, but
we appreciate it. Are you using clean tech terminologies in selling your machines?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, but I think that we would use them in a different way. We wouldn't use them in terms of buy this because it's clean tech. We'd be talking about efficiency and effectiveness, and we'd be talking about cost effective application. And I think that's true, like I said, with, certainly at Coke, like we had, lots of products that were environmentally friendly. And what you always find with the consumer is the consumer wants that, but they don't want to pay more for it. So people buy a Tesla car because it is the best driving experience, I think, not because they're getting an electric car. They're interested in electric cars, but why Tesla's been so successful is because they make one that really works. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yes,
Janet, but
no, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Ed, you've been quiet. I'd sure like to showcase what you're up to. I know that you're working on various programs locally and internationally. Some of which involve solar energy. Tell us what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks, Janet. And thanks, panel, for allowing me to participate. I'm a lawyer licensed in both Arizona and Mexico, and I spent the majority of my professional career in Mexico. We believe that the current view toward energy should be approached from the optic of one, climate, and the two aspects of climate analysis is mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is the reduction of the emission of carbon. Obviously, if you have a solar array that powers a growing facility or a processing facility, that addresses mitigation. But we believe now, especially with the fragility of the utility transmission network, we believe that adaptation is where we should be focused. In work with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and evaluation of their solar maps, we are just very fortunate to be living where we're living. The southwest of the United States and the northwest of Mexico is the sweet spot for solar generation and production. In addition, we have, in addition to the surplus sun, we have surplus land. So costs associated with the generation and on-site storage are relatively low compared to urban growth centers. With the other thing I think is important too, it's not we're not talking about a binary option here. We're in an energy transition where I believe that the curve is going toward renewable. So the opportunity is to get in front of that curve and take advantage of existing technology with a current legal and regulatory structure, and that meets the operational imperatives of whatever industry we're talking about. But specifically in the cannabis industry, owners have the option of starting slow, and that is buying green energy directly from their utility. That's easy. You just call up here in Arizona, you call up APS, SRP, or TEP, and they'll provide you with an option. The second way of doing it is, again, not as capital intensive and not as necessarily hands-on, but it will give the owner operator insight into the energy world, which is obviously not part of your core business, energy production. So the second option is to work with an independent power producer. And there are numerous companies in the Southwest US and in Mexico that can come in, develop an array, and by the use of a power purchase agreement, and we've all heard the term PPP, you would have a PPP signed with an IPP, which is independent power producer, who would then supply the power needs of each facility. The third opportunity is the biggest stretch, and that is self-generation on site. But I believe this is where a lot of industries are going for a couple reasons. One, cost. There may be parity in cost of electricity on an on-site production facility. Secondly, scalability. You balance your demand with your supply. And third, what we're looking at now, which is extremely important, is the opportunity to supply your entire supply chain. So you can then co-locate your growing operation next to your processing operation on the same real estate footprint without the need for environmental impact assessments or long extended negotiations for transmission agreements with your utilities. So in a nutshell, we see this as the ideal moment to get involved, not necessarily to start from scratch on your own site, but start working up that value curve and cut out the brokers. Save your money, especially if energy is 50% of the costs in this industry.
Anyone else want to comment on those very important ideas? Ed, are you aware of any company, say in the Southwest, that has already contracted with the IPP? Is
Yeah,
it?
there are,
Yeah.
that's a thing right now, Janet. It's not new. There are numerous highly qualified solar companies, IPPs, who are looking for take or pay contracts with an off-taker in order to satisfy the financial due diligence requirements of the capital source. And then, Ryan, to go to your point, your business is capital intense, and I understand that every dollar wants to go into the planting, but if you can push the capital raise to the IPP and get some type of competitive renewable energy supply in a long-term take or pay, those are bankable right now.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's absolutely what it's going to take for us to do an adoption of an on-site or a take or pay type of contract. You know, it's been a couple of years. I did have a couple of folks approach me about something like that, but ultimately, when it came down to the underwriting of the financing, the fact that we were a cannabis company and that our operations were still technically illegal under federal law was ended up being either a deal breaker or caused the financing to be so expensive that it wasn't cost effective for us. But you know, that is changing day by day, and the rates for cannabis financing, the cost for financing is coming down as we get more and more accepted. And if safe banking passes, then that changes everything.
Yeah, and you know, a good example, Janet, going back to your request for an example, this is outside of the cannabis industry, but the crypto miners are now co-locating in Texas next to wind turbines to get access to that very, very low cost electrical supply. So it's a thing right now. The challenge from both the generation and the demand side is meeting the due diligence requirements of the bank.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that, you know, 50% of the cost of renewables like wind or solar is actually transmission. And so when say you pay 15 cents per kilowatt hour, about 7 cents of it is just the cost of transmitting it to you over a long distance. So when you co-locate, or you have like, there's like Ed's, you know, talking about if a company basically puts a solar field right next to your facility, it essentially cuts the cost of that electrical charge in half. So I do think
and the risk too. Do you
Mhm.
want
Yep.
to do you want to be entirely dependent upon a spotty supply of a utility?
Yeah, I mean, it creates other challenges. I think one of the big enablers to that model is going to be battery storage. Or I shouldn't even say battery storage, because battery storage is so expensive. I think we kind of assume that's the direction it's going to, and California is giving big credits for battery storage right now. But battery storage it's like to put a 1 megawatt field, you have to pay $1 million just for batteries. But I think,
Wow.
okay, no, please go ahead.
No, I was going to suggest that, you know, that a hybrid approach can be taken, you know, as you're in that transition. Use as much of the solar power that you can generate during the day, and then tap into the grid, you know, overnight.
Yeah.
So there are ways, and I'm very encouraged by our friends at Arizona Public Service. They've really changed their tune in the last couple of years, and they're willing to work with Arizona industries to find the right horse for the course. There's no one solution for any industry or even any plant.
Are you familiar with any cannabis company though that's partnered up with APS to provide alternative energy?
Well, you know, I was talking to my cousin the other day, who's in the cannabis business in California, and his team is actively looking at the co-location concept in extreme rural California. You know, you don't want a retail walk-in presence at your grow operation. So if you're in the middle of the desert with a high solar index from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Why not be in the middle of nowhere in California with your grow and processing operation? Obviously, you've got to think about security, but that's the case in any location.
Right. Ivy, you've been nodding heavily. Would you like to add a few pointers?
Ooh, I just agreed with, everything that Ed said. I'm out here in Palm Springs, California. We have a lot of large cultivators out here and large manufacturing facilities out here right next to the wind turbines. I really couldn't agree more. So
I talk about predictability. When, or predictions, when do we think having clean tech programs is going to be a competitive advantage?
I think they already are, to be honest with you, but maybe that's just my experience because I do a lot of the application writing. So maybe, some of the applications that, were awarded licenses haven't gotten up and running yet. But, that's really the path that we're headed on as we continue to write these applications and be awarded licenses. So it's here and it's coming online to a jurisdiction near you very soon, if it's not already there.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot where you're located also. There's certain states that electricity is really expensive and there's not much sunlight, and they have great programs for certain renewables. And so I think that's where I think it'll start regionally. I think you'll see certain areas of the country adopting sort of like maybe renewable microgrids faster than other areas because of those economics. But again, it goes back to when the economics become really important.
And do you foresee those regional areas being commenced as the initiative of local governments, or is it going to be the market and entrepreneurs that start that change?
I'm very entrepreneurial. And so I kind of think that, there's, regulators put up regulations and entrepreneurs find a way to make it work. But I am seeing it, like I can't give names obviously, but like we are seeing our customers doing similar strategies in the Northeast, as Ed was referring to, where they're actually working, either building their own, say, solar field, or they're working with a company that basically installs a solar field right next to their facility and sells electricity to them for 5 years. And then after that, the solar panels become theirs. So you're starting to see these kind of interesting sort of innovations, like financial and energy innovations, because in the Northeast, in these particular states, electricity is just really expensive, and there are programs to provide at least some subsidies or rebates for these type of investments.
Great.
And Janet, I would just add too that I think when it comes to competitive advantage specifically, and you've asked that a few times on this call, which I think is an important concept. I think the being a little bit ahead of the curve is what's going to create the competitive advantage. It's not, I don't think it's going to be having the clean tech, but I think what really is going to be an issue are people that have to catch up. And I think, businesses that kind of fall too far behind that curve, then they become competitively disadvantaged. It's not that you have an advantage by doing clean tech necessarily in my mind, but I think that if you're not keeping up, you will find it very hard to compete. And it also, I think, is, this whole concept of kind of retrofitting to me is going to just be a nightmare for a lot of folks as they're trying to go back and go, oh, well, we thought we had a solution, but now, and you've got this dynamic of a state regulated industry in cannabis, and then a federally regulated, kind of effort on the clean tech side. And that's just going to create so much confusion as we go forward, that I think having solutions and having technologies in place that are flexible, that can grow and change quickly, that you can pivot quickly, I think that's where the competitive advantage comes, not a focus on clean tech.
But how does the average company that perhaps doesn't have the access to capital, like say the multi-state operators, how does that company keep up? How financially, where does it get the money to fund
Well,
this?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking one question, but I will offer one point of view that's a little bit different, and particularly in the cannabis space. And we've talked about this publicly at Green Mill a lot, is right sizing your capital investment, right? I mean, there are very few cannabis companies, I think, that really people get mad at me when I say this, but that really need some of the scale that they think they need. So it's like, how do we focus on the demand side of the equation and build our capabilities as efficiently as possible to deliver against that demand, versus trying to build these massive operations that end up costing huge amounts of capital with massive installed equipment bases that are virtually impossible to move from, and then you're stuck.
And, Janet, I'll just add that, change on the federal landscape, safe banking really will open that up and even out the playing field. Because right now, when you're looking for sort of a private equity type investment, it's less attractive to a big, family fund or something like that to place $1 million. They're looking to place $20 million probably, and maybe you don't need that. So it's hard for you to get. So safe banking would open up access to regular banking loans, to regular real estate loans, small business loans. That would even the playing field a lot.
And I think there's also low-lying fruit that's underutilized right now. Like for one thing, and these are opportunities that I think are created because there is something unique about growing food in a controlled environment, and that's that the plant is flexible. So that creates this opportunity for one of the low-lying fruit I'm thinking about is load shifting. One of the big challenges with a grid that relies on renewable energy is matching demand for power with when it's being produced by the renewable, like sun, like the solar or wind. And so it's really helpful to the utility if consumers of energy can be flexible about when they're using that power. And like for instance, in California, very few, if any, I'm not sure if there's any cannabis producers that are participating in these load shifting programs offered by the utilities, because they're worried about the sensitivity of the plant to changes in photo period. And I think as a researcher, I would say that the plant is much more sturdy and much more flexible than you think it is, and that providing the amount of light it needs in 10 hours, or providing 10 hours of light and then shutting down for 2 hours and providing 2 more hours of light later on, is not going to affect the plant. The plant's going to be fine. But at the same time, you're going to save a lot of money because these programs can have a significant payout, and you're going to assist in the grid at balancing between the demand and supply of renewable energy.
Ryan, what say you in response?
Oh, he's a greenhouse, so it's gonna it's more challenging,
Yeah, we rely on the natural cycle of the sun, and so it is hard for us to shift that.
Yeah.
But that is a huge deal for utilities. I know that because I used to do renewable energy law in my private practice, and particularly in a state where we do have a decent amount of solar adoption and penetration, shifting that demand to the time where those are producing versus the evening is huge.
Thank you. How are we doing on time? Shall we?
5 minutes.
Ed, tell us what's new, if anything, in the energy area for Mexico. And is there anything that's happening there that we ought to be considering here?
Yeah, I think it's an opportune time to take a look at Mexico, given their recent legislation in the cannabis field. So from a regulatory standpoint, Mexico is behind the US in the legalization of cannabis. However, it's well on its way to to following the US model. And I think, as we heard from our panelists, the issue of retrofitting versus greenfield operation will be especially important in Mexico. And ideally, the new operations, the new grow and processing plants in Mexico will take the best and apply it into Mexico. And since we are a part of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or USMCA, as recently renegotiated, I think we'll have extremely favorable federal regulatory and tariff provisions for the cannabis industry. So offshoring growth into Mexico is a distinct possibility if you consider that a treatment such as moving from agriculture to pharmaceutical. You're moving in tariff classifications as well. Mexico is extremely interested and attentive to the developments in.
Our panelists, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, but I'm happy to open up the last few minutes to anyone who wants to add a few comments or tell us more about his or her company. Oh, Ivy, good, go for it.
What I do is I want to talk about the opportunity for big business and legacy operators to come together to persuade lawmakers to enact favorable legislation. So oftentimes these two different entities are pitted against each other. And I think here we have an opportunity to work together and kind of bridge the gap. And what I mean by that is legacy operators, I really encourage you to get out there, go to study sessions, talk about how expensive cultivation lighting is, talk about the stressors and the difficulties that your businesses are having. Big businesses, hire the lobbyists to go to Washington, to go to your, your state Congress people and have them lobby for favorable legislation, including things like subsidies that traditional agricultural farmers have always, they've always had an opportunity to get those. And so what we want to see is cannabis be eligible for those same kind of subsidies. And remember, lawmakers are just simply making a choice as to who qualifies, who's eligible, and who's not. So you got to get the lobbyists out there to get the legislation that you want to see that's also going to benefit the industry as a whole.
Is California already there? Or is it? No. Is any state already there? No.
I don't believe that it is. And I think we have a long way to go. And I think we need a lot of people to stand up and participate, whether you're legacy or whether you're a large MSO.
Thank you, everyone. I'll pass the baton to you, Lolla.
Well, thank you, everybody. This was a very interesting conversation of what we hope to be one in a series of discussions about the intersection of cannabis and green tech, clean tech. We just coined a new word that could be our next topic. And just in case some of our attendees caught us late, I just wanted to introduce everybody one more time. This is James Eaves with VoltServer, Ivy Bader, who is in regulatory and consulting at Global Go, and of course, Janet Jackim, our moderator, equity partner at Zuber Lawler, Ed Ranger with the Ranger firm, Ryan Hurley with Copperstate Farms, General Counsel at Copperstate Farms, and Wes Reynolds at Green Mill Supercritical. Thank you so very much, and we hope to see you again at some other events.
Thanks to
Thank you.
Lawler.
Thanks.
You all. Thanks so much.